For as long as I could remember, I had dreamed of working at Harper & Co., one of the leading marketing agencies in the country. The company had built a reputation for its innovative campaigns, high-profile clients, and dynamic team culture. I'd followed their success stories, devouring every interview article and blog post I could find about them. To me, landing a job there wasn't just a career move. It was the pinnacle of achievement. It was the place where I could finally prove to myself that all my hard work, education, and passion for marketing would pay off. After years of struggling through low-paying internships and entry-level positions, I knew this was my chance. I had spent countless hours refining my resume, ensuring every skill I had gained was highlighted to show I was exactly what they needed, researched the company inside and out, meticulously prepared for every possible interview question, and tailored my application to reflect my enthusiasm and deep understanding of their values. When I submitted my application for the position of marketing strategist, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. I knew I was qualified. I had the experience, the education, and the drive. Surely this time it would be different. Days turned into weeks, and I started checking my email every few hours. I'd obsessively refresh my inbox, hoping for a response, anything to let me know that my application had been seen, that I hadn't been forgotten. When the interview request finally came, it was almost surreal. My heart raced as I read the email. They wanted to schedule an interview. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward for years. But then came the interview. The excitement I'd initially felt quickly shifted to nerves as the weight of the opportunity sank in. I had studied everything, every marketing campaign the company had launched, every article about their CEO, every success story. But when I walked into that sleek, glass-walled conference room and saw the team of high-powered executives sitting across from me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow out of my league. I tried to stay calm, to speak with confidence, but the questions they asked were far more intense than I had anticipated. They wanted to know specifics: how I would handle real-world challenges, how I would integrate their existing strategies into new markets. It was everything I had prepared for, and yet I felt like I was fumbling. After the interview, I was left with an overwhelming sense of doubt. Had I said the right things? Had I impressed them? Or had I simply come across as just another candidate vying for the same position? The waiting began again, but this time the uncertainty gnawed at me with more intensity. Weeks passed, and I didn't hear a word from them. I followed up with a polite email, hoping to hear something, anything, but the silence was deafening. Slowly, that initial spark of hope began to fade, replaced by the cold, harsh reality that perhaps I wasn't as qualified as I thought. Maybe my dream job was just that, a dream. And as I sat in my apartment looking over the rejection emails from other companies, I couldn't help but wonder if I had been chasing something that would never be within my reach. I had invested so much of myself into this job search, and yet it felt like I was running on empty. The constant cycle of preparing, applying, and waiting for responses was starting to wear me down. Each rejection felt like a personal failure, and with every unanswered email, my self-confidence eroded just a little bit more. The dream job that had once felt so tangible now seemed like an impossible fantasy, and it was in this moment of utter exhaustion, of feeling like I had nothing left to give, that I finally made the decision. Maybe it was time to walk away. The weeks that followed the rejection were the hardest. Each day felt like a repeat of the last, filled with the same crushing routine of job applications, unanswered emails, and the ever-present anxiety about the future. At first, I tried to stay positive, telling myself that rejection was just part of the process, that each no was a step closer to the yes I was desperately hoping for. But with every new rejection email, my optimism began to wane. The constant barrage of "we regret to inform you" messages had a way of chipping away at my confidence until there was almost nothing left. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something wrong. Maybe my resume wasn't polished enough, or perhaps my interview skills weren't as sharp as I thought. The self-doubt was unbearable. I had spent years building my career, gaining experience and developing a portfolio of work I was proud of. Yet, it seemed like I couldn't catch a break. It was frustrating to watch others, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, land jobs with ease while I was stuck in an endless loop of rejection. I couldn't help but compare myself to them, wondering what they had that I didn't. Every time I thought I was one step closer, the door would close in my face. I would put on a brave face for my friends and family, pretending like it didn't bother me. But inside, I was unraveling. The pressure to succeed, the weight of my own expectations was becoming suffocating. I had dreamed about this job for so long, worked so hard to get here, but now it felt like all my efforts were in vain. My friends tried to lift my spirits, telling me that setbacks were a natural part of the journey and that I shouldn't give up. But the more they said it, the more I questioned whether they truly understood. They hadn't been the ones pouring their heart and soul into applications for months, only to be met with silence or polite rejections. They didn't know what it felt like to stare at an empty inbox waiting for a response that never came. At times I felt like I was drowning in negativity. I would wake up each morning convinced that today would be different, that today I would get the email or the phone call that would change everything. But as the day wore on and I was met with silence once again, the hope I had managed to muster that morning would slip away, leaving me disheartened and exhausted. I found myself avoiding social media too, seeing others post about their new jobs, their promotions, and their career milestones. Felt like a constant reminder of how far I had fallen behind. There were days when I wanted to quit altogether, to pack up and move on from the idea of my dream job. Maybe I wasn't cut out for it. I thought maybe I should settle for something else, something more attainable. But every time I considered giving up, a voice inside me pushed back. It wasn't that easy to let go of something I had worked so hard for, something I had wanted for so long. The dream of working at Harper & Co. had been part of my vision for the future, and no matter how many times I was rejected, that vision still lingered in the back of my mind. Despite the overwhelming urge to quit, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't finished yet. The frustration and disappointment were real, but they weren't enough to extinguish the fire inside me. Every time I thought about walking away, I remembered how close I had come before I had made it to the interview stage with one of the most prestigious companies in the industry that had to count for something. It wasn't a total loss. It was progress. But as much as I told myself that it didn't make the sting of rejection any easier to bear, at some point I realized that maybe I needed to shift my perspective. Instead of focusing on what I had lost or what hadn't worked out, I started to look at the journey as a whole. Each rejection was teaching me something valuable, whether it was refining my resume, improving my interview skills, or learning how to handle disappointment with grace. I had to stop thinking of rejection as failure and start viewing it as part of the learning process. But that wasn't easy. One of the hardest things to accept was that I couldn't control everything. I couldn't control the decisions of hiring managers or the timing of opportunities I had, to trust that the right job would come along when the time was right. But letting go of that control felt like a leap of faith I wasn't sure I was ready to take. Still, I knew deep down that if I was going to make it through this, I had to keep moving forward. I had to keep believing in myself, even when the world around me seemed to be telling me otherwise. In the midst of all this, I tried to stay active. I started attending networking events, looking for new opportunities to learn and grow. I joined webinars, reached out to industry professionals for advice, and even took on a few freelance projects to keep my skills sharp. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. Every small victory felt like a reminder that I wasn't giving up. I wasn't completely defeated. And even though the dream job felt further out of reach than ever, I wasn't going to stop trying. I had reached the breaking point. The pressure, the constant self-doubt, and the disappointment had piled up to a level I could no longer ignore. It felt like I had been treading water for months, struggling to keep my head above the surface, but no matter how hard I tried, I was sinking. My energy was drained, my enthusiasm shattered. The dream job that had once felt so attainable now seemed as distant and unreal as a star I could never reach. I had spent countless sleepless nights replaying every detail of my interviews, every word I had said, wondering where I had gone wrong. The constant cycle of rejection had left me emotionally raw, and I felt completely lost. There were days when I could barely summon the energy to get out of bed. I had always been a go-getter, the type of person who woke up ready to take on the world. But lately, the thought of facing another rejection was enough to paralyze me with dread. The relentless stream of no messages, the unanswered emails, and the ghosting from companies I had poured my heart into left me feeling insignificant. I started questioning myself in ways I never had before. Was I good enough? Did I really have what it took to succeed? Or was I just fooling myself into believing I could ever have a career in this industry? I tried to mask my feelings, putting on a brave face for my friends and family. They didn't know how much I was struggling. They didn't know how close I was to giving up. I couldn't bear to show them my vulnerability, my fear that I was never going to get the job I had worked so hard for, so I smiled through it, told them everything was fine, and acted like I wasn't terrified of the future. But behind that mask, I was falling apart. The longer I went without hearing back from Harper & Co., the more I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. It wasn't just a job I was after, it was validation, a way to prove that all my sacrifices had been worth something. But the more time passed, the harder it became to stay hopeful. I found myself starting to avoid the things that once brought me joy. I stopped working on my passion projects, the ones I used to throw myself into with excitement and creativity. I stopped reaching out to friends for support because I didn't want to burden them with my misery. Every moment I spent thinking about my career felt like a reminder that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't living up to the expectations I had set for myself. The walls I had built to protect myself from failure were slowly crumbling, and I had no idea how to stop it. I tried to distract myself by focusing on other things, going for walks, binge watching TV shows, anything to take my mind off the constant worry. But nothing worked. Every time I opened my email, my stomach dropped. Every time I heard someone mention a new job offer or career success, I felt like I was suffocating. The weight of failure was too much to bear. It wasn't just about the job, it was about everything I had put into it, all the energy and hope I had invested only to be met with rejection after rejection. I felt like a failure, and worse, I felt like I was running out of time. The world around me seemed to be moving forward while I was stuck in place spinning my wheels. One night, after yet another silent day with no word from any of the companies I had applied to, I broke down. I was sitting on my couch staring blankly at the wall when the tears finally came. The frustration, the fear, the exhaustion, all of it came pouring out. I cried for the future. I felt slipping away for the dream job that seemed impossible now for the self-doubt that had taken root in my heart. I cried for the girl who used to believe she could do anything, the girl who used to be so confident and full of hope. And in that moment, I realized something I was grieving. I was grieving not just the job, but the person I had been before all of this started. I had let the struggle consume me, had allowed my sense of self-worth to become entangled in a career I didn't yet have. That night, I fell asleep with tears on my pillow, the weight of everything still pressing down on me. I didn't have any answers, no sudden burst of motivation or clarity. I just felt empty, as though I had nothing left to give. I had been working so hard for so long, and yet here I was, broken and lost. But sometimes the breaking point is where transformation happens. As I lay there in the dark, I realized that I had been so focused on the outcome, the job, the success, that I had lost sight of the bigger picture. I had spent so much time trying to control everything, trying to make things happen on my timeline, that I had forgotten what was really important. I had forgotten that my worth wasn't defined by the job I held or the offers I received. It was defined by my resilience, my ability to keep going, even when the road was tough, and my capacity to grow from the struggle. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of clarity. I wasn't done yet. I still had fight left in me. It didn't matter how many rejections I had faced. It wasn't the end. I would keep pushing, not because I was guaranteed to succeed, but because I had to believe in myself enough to try again. The job I wanted was still out there, and if it wasn't Harper & Co., then it would be somewhere else. But I had to keep moving forward. The world didn't owe me success, but it was up to me to keep working toward it no matter how many times I fell down. And just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I received a call that would change everything. It had been a few days since I had hit my emotional rock bottom, and things were starting to feel different. I wasn't exactly bouncing back to my old self, but I was slowly finding a sense of inner peace. I still hadn't heard anything from Harper & Co., and the bitter taste of rejection lingered, but I had stopped obsessing over it. I decided that I had to trust the process, trust that the right opportunity would come at the right time. My mind, at least, was trying to adjust to the idea of letting go of the desperate need for immediate success. I spent that afternoon sitting at my desk working on some freelance projects to keep myself distracted. The rhythmic tapping of my keyboard was oddly calming. It wasn't the dream job I had imagined, but at least it was something. My phone was sitting on the desk face down as usual. I'd gotten into the habit of ignoring notifications. Everything from job alerts to personal messages had begun to feel like a distraction from my focus. But then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it at first. Another spam email or a reminder to book an appointment I'd been putting off. But when I picked it up, I noticed that the caller ID said Harper & Co. My heart stopped for a split second, and I had to double-check that I wasn't imagining it Harper & Co. It couldn't be. They'd sent me that rejection email weeks ago. There was no way they would be calling now, not after all this time. My mind raced with possibilities. Had they reconsidered? Were they offering me another position? Was it even them? I took a deep breath, tried to steady my racing thoughts, and answered the call. Hello. My voice was shaky, betraying the calm facade I was trying to hold on to. Hi, is this your name? A woman's voice asked on the other end of the line. Her tone was warm but formal, and it took me a second to place it. Yes, this is, I said, my stomach flipping with nervous excitement. This is Emily from Harper & Co. I'm calling regarding your application for the job title position. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to follow up with you directly. First off, I want to apologize for the delay in communication. It's been a busy few weeks, and we had to review some internal priorities. But we've had a chance to take another look at your application, and we were very impressed with your background. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. The words didn't seem to make sense. She was impressed with my background. I had almost forgotten about the initial excitement I felt when I first applied. That hope had been overshadowed by so many rejections, so much uncertainty. Wow, thank you, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tears beginning to well up in my eyes. I really appreciate you reaching out. Emily continued. We'd like to invite you to a second-round interview. Would you be available to speak with the hiring manager next week? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just some polite courtesy call or a formality. They actually wanted to interview me again. For a second time, the word second-round interview floated in my mind like a beacon of hope, a sign that things might finally be turning around. Of course, yes, I said, my voice a little too eager, but I couldn't contain it. I would be happy to. Emily laughed softly. Great, we'll send you the details over email. We're really looking forward to speaking with you again. Before she hung up, I managed to ask the one question that had been nagging at me since she mentioned the delay. I'm just curious what changed. Why the delay in getting back to me? There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Emily responded. We had some internal shifts, and honestly, the hiring process was taking longer than expected. But after reviewing your profile again, we realized you were exactly what we were looking for. I'm glad we circled back. Thank you, I whispered. My heart full, my mind still trying to process everything. I really appreciate it. Of course, we'll be in touch soon. Have a great day, she said before the call ended. I sat there for a long moment, phone still in hand, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. A second-round interview from Harper & Co. I had almost convinced myself that this dream job was out of reach, that I wasn't good enough, that maybe it wasn't meant to be. But here I was, being given a second chance. For the rest of the day, my mind was in a haze. I couldn't focus on anything except the call. It felt like the universe had just thrown me a lifeline, like everything I had been through, the rejections, the doubts, the pain, had all led to this moment. It was hard to believe how quickly everything had shifted. One phone call had completely changed my perspective. All the negativity, all the moments of wanting to give up, suddenly felt like distant memories. The breakthrough I had been waiting for had arrived, and it came in the most unexpected way. It wasn't the immediate perfect solution I had hoped for, but it was enough a sign that my persistence, even in the face of rejection, had been worth it. As I hung up, a sense of calm washed over me. I knew that no matter what happened next, I had fought for this opportunity, and now it was up to me to make the most of it. But one thing was certain, I wasn't about to give up on my dream now. The second-round interview with Harper & Co. came quicker than I expected, and with it came a rush of emotions I hadn't felt in weeks. As the days leading up to the interview passed, I found myself oscillating between cautious optimism and the nagging voice of doubt that had accompanied me for so long. The fear that I might fail again, that this opportunity too would slip through my fingers, loomed over me. But beneath that fear, something else was stirring hope. I hadn't realized how badly I needed this spark of hope until it was reignited. Hope wasn't just a distant feeling anymore. It was a force that was pulling me forward, a reminder that the future was still full of possibilities. I remembered why I had fallen in love with this field in the first place. The excitement of creativity, the sense of purpose, and the belief that my work could truly make a difference, It wasn't just about landing the perfect job anymore. It was about rediscovering the passion that had driven me before all the setbacks. The night before the interview, I found myself sitting in front of the mirror practicing my answers, rehearsing my story. There was a sense of preparation that felt different this time, like I wasn't just preparing for the interview, but for the opportunity that might be life-changing. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking at the interview as a test of my worth, but as a chance to show up fully to demonstrate my growth, my resilience, and my readiness. I knew that this moment wasn't just about what I could offer Harper & Co. It was about me showing myself how far I had come, how much I had grown in the face of adversity. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being authentic. I had learned over the past few months that life doesn't always go as planned. There would be setbacks, there would be heartaches, and there would be moments of doubt. But those moments didn't define me. How I responded to them, how I got back up each time, that was what mattered. When the day of the interview arrived, I walked into the office with a sense of calm confidence I hadn't felt in months. I still had the nerves. Of course, nerves were normal, but they weren't controlling me. I wasn't desperate for the job anymore. I was excited for the conversation, for the opportunity to connect with the people at Harper & Co. and show them who I was. The interview itself was unlike any I had been through before. It was less about the pressure to perform and more about the feeling of being in a space where I could truly express myself. I wasn't just answering questions. I was sharing my journey, the struggles, the breakthroughs, and the lessons learned. I could tell they were listening intently, not just to my skills, but to the passion that had been reignited within me. They asked about my previous experience, my vision for the role, and how I handled setbacks. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to talk about the challenges I'd faced. I shared the moments of self-doubt, the times when I almost gave up, and how I had worked through them. I wasn't presenting a polished version of myself. I was presenting the real me, the person who had fought to get to this point. As the interview wrapped up, one of the hiring managers leaned back in her chair smiling. "I have to say," she said, "we're really impressed with how you've handled everything. You've demonstrated a lot of resilience, and that's exactly what we're looking for in this role." In that moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just an interview for a job. It was an opportunity to share my story, to show that I had learned, grown, and evolved. I wasn't the same person who had sent that initial application months ago, unsure of her worth. I had transformed. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more determined than ever to succeed. As I walked out of the interview room, I felt something shift deep inside me. The fear and self-doubt that had clouded my mind for so long seemed to have dissipated. I wasn't dependent on the outcome anymore. I had already won by simply showing up as my authentic self. I had already proven that I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. The rest of the day passed in a blur. My mind kept replaying the conversation, analyzing each moment, trying to gauge whether I had said the right things. But no matter how much I analyzed, I realized there was only one thing I could control: how I viewed myself. I had done my best. The rest was out of my hands. Days passed, and I found myself thinking about that interview more and more, not in a nervous, overthinking kind of way, but with an overwhelming sense of peace. I had done the work. I had shown up. I had given my all. And no matter the outcome, I knew that I had come a long way. Then, just when I had almost convinced myself to stop checking my email every few hours, I received a notification. It was an email from Harper & Co. I opened it with shaky hands, barely able to breathe. The email started with a few pleasantries. The usual thank you for your time and interest in the role, and then the words that made my heart stop. We are pleased to offer you the position of job title at Harper & Co. Tears filled my eyes as I read the email again, and this time I didn't fight them. I let them come. I had earned this moment. I had earned this opportunity. All the pain, all the setbacks, all the times I thought I wasn't good enough, none of it had been in vain. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of months of struggle, doubt, and persistence. I had made it. It wasn't just the job offer that meant so much to me. It was the realization that I had grown, that I had proved to myself I was worthy of this moment. This was no longer just a dream job. It was a reminder that hope, even when it feels lost, can always be reignited. The moment I received the job offer, everything seemed to come full circle. All the months of uncertainty, self-doubt, and rejection faded into the background, replaced by a rush of excitement and anticipation. I was about to begin a new chapter, one that I had fought for, one that was going to challenge me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But amidst the elation, a sense of responsibility quickly followed. This wasn't just about landing a job. It was about stepping into the person I wanted to become, someone who could take on this opportunity with confidence, someone who would rise to the challenge and prove that I deserved it. In the days following the offer, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions. There was the immediate euphoria, of course, the thrill of knowing I had secured the job I had dreamed about for so long. But there was also a growing awareness of the pressure that came with this opportunity. I couldn't afford to rest on my laurels. This wasn't a fluke. I had earned this, but I had to prove that I was capable of more than just making it to the interview stage. Now I had to show up, I had to deliver, and I had to embrace the next steps with a mindset of growth and determination. I knew that the next few weeks were going to be crucial. As I prepared to start at Harper & Co., there were so many things to consider. Everything from the logistics of transitioning into a new role to the mental and emotional preparation that would be necessary for success. The transition would be a challenge, no doubt, but it was also an incredible opportunity for growth. First and foremost, I focused on the practical aspects. I began by reviewing the details of the offer, salary, benefits, job expectations, and making sure everything aligned with what we had discussed during the interview process. Once the paperwork was signed, I focused on logistical tasks like setting up my new workspace and organizing my schedule to make room for the transition. I spent hours researching the company's culture, team structure, and the specific projects they were working on. I wanted to hit the ground running, and that meant making sure I was fully prepared for the first day. But it wasn't just about the logistics. I knew I needed to mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. I had spent so much time being consumed by the rejection, by the struggle to prove myself, that I hadn't taken the time to fully envision what success would look like once I got the job. It was time to shift my mindset from the person who was desperately searching for validation to the person who is capable of leading, learning, and making an impact. To do this, I spent time reflecting on the qualities that had brought me to this point: resilience, determination, and a willingness to embrace failure as part of the process. I made a list of personal goals that I wanted to focus on in the coming months. These weren't just professional goals. They were goals for my personal development as well. I wanted to strengthen my communication skills, improve my ability to collaborate with others, and continue building my confidence as a leader. I also wanted to make sure that no matter how successful I became, I would never lose sight of the person I was becoming along the way. I also took time to reach out to a few mentors and colleagues I trusted, seeking their advice as I prepared to enter this new phase of my career. Their words were invaluable. They reminded me to stay grounded, to stay true to my values, and to never underestimate the importance of building strong relationships with my new colleagues. They emphasize the importance of staying humble, of being open to learning, and of embracing challenges with a positive attitude. As the start date approached, I found myself growing more excited than nervous. I had been given the opportunity to prove myself in a way I never thought possible. I had made it through the hardest parts, the rejection, the doubt, the uncertainty, and now it was time to take the next step. I wasn't just entering a new job, I was entering a new version of myself. One who had learned from past failures, one who was ready to embrace the future with an open heart and an unwavering belief in my own potential. On my first day, I remember walking into the office with a sense of purpose. I wasn't the same person who had applied for the job months ago, unsure of herself. I had grown. I had changed. I had faced the hardest parts of my journey, and I had emerged stronger on the other side. Now I was ready to take on whatever came my way. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of self-doubt along the way, but I was ready to face them head on. I had learned that the road to success isn't linear. There are bumps along the way, but they don't define you. It's how you navigate those bumps, how you rise after each setback, that ultimately shapes who you become. And with that mindset, I stepped into my new role at Harper & Co., ready to take on the next chapter of my journey. I knew that the future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt confident I was exactly where I needed to be. The day of the final interview had arrived, and it felt different from any other interview I had experienced before. There was no nervous energy, no overwhelming pressure to perform. Instead, there was a quiet anticipation, a sense that this was the moment I had been working toward for so long. I had come a long way since the initial application, and I felt a newfound confidence that had been forged through months of struggle and growth. I wasn't just walking into this interview to prove I was good enough. I was walking in to show them who I had become. When I first received the call about this final stage of the interview process, I had felt a flash of excitement mixed with the familiar pang of doubt. After all, this wasn't just another interview. It was the last hurdle before I could officially start my dream job. And I knew deep down this was the moment where everything could change. The interview was being held in person at the company's headquarters, a sleek, modern building that screamed success. The moment I stepped into the lobby, I couldn't help but feel a wave of awe mixed with nerves. I had been dreaming of this moment for so long, and now that it was finally here, it was hard to fully comprehend. The receptionist greeted me warmly and led me to the conference room where the interview would take place. The panel was small, just 3 people, the hiring manager, a senior team leader, and the head of human resources. As they introduced themselves and welcomed me to the room, I immediately felt at ease. There was no intimidation, no power dynamic that made me feel small. Instead, there was a mutual respect, a feeling that we were all in this room together, working toward a common goal. As the interview began, I realized this wasn't going to be like the others I had faced. It wasn't just about answering questions or proving my skills. It was about having a real conversation, a dialogue that would allow both sides to get to know each other on a deeper level. They asked about my past experiences, my accomplishments, and my vision for the future. But what really stood out was how they wanted to know how I would approach challenges, how I would contribute to the team dynamic, and what values I held most important. For the first time, I wasn't just reciting rehearsed answers. I was speaking from the heart. I told them about the struggles I had faced, how the rejections, the failures, and the personal setbacks had shaped me into the person I was today. I spoke about the lessons I had learned along the way, the importance of resilience, the power of self-reflection, and the strength that comes from embracing failure as a learning experience. I spoke about how I had come to understand that success wasn't just about the end result, but about the journey, the growth, and the ability to adapt to the challenges that life throws at you. There was a moment during the interview when I realized I was no longer worried about the outcome. I wasn't anxious about whether or not they would hire me. Instead, I was focused on the conversation, on making sure they understood who I was, not just as a candidate, but as a person. I wanted them to know that I wasn't just looking for a job. I was looking for a place where I could make a meaningful impact, where I could continue to grow and learn, and where I could contribute to a team that shared the same values of growth, collaboration, and innovation. At one point, the hiring manager paused, leaned forward, and asked, "What has been your biggest challenge in your career so far, and how did you overcome it?" The question struck me in a way I wasn't expecting. It wasn't just a simple inquiry. It was an opportunity to reflect on the entire journey that had brought me here. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told them about the moment when I almost gave up on my dreams, when I felt like I was chasing something that was always just out of reach. I spoke about the internal struggle I had faced, the self-doubt that had consumed me, and how despite everything I had kept pushing forward. I told them about the phone call that changed everything, when I realized that sometimes it's not about the destination, but the people and the experiences that shape you along the way. As I shared my story, I saw the expressions on their faces change. They weren't just hearing me, they were connecting with me. It wasn't just about what I had accomplished, but about how I had handled the challenges and how I had persevered through the difficult times. They were looking for someone who didn't just have the skills, but someone who had the emotional intelligence, the drive, and the passion to succeed in the long run. And I realized for the first time that I was that person. I wasn't perfect, but I was prepared. I had the resilience, the self-awareness, and the heart to make a real impact. As the interview came to a close, the hiring manager smiled and thanked me for my time. I stood up, shook hands with each member of the panel, and walked out of the conference room with a sense of accomplishment. I had given it my all, and I knew that no matter the outcome, I had shown them who I truly was. I had left everything on the table, and that was all I could do. The next few days were a blur. My mind kept replaying the moments from the interview, analyzing every word, every gesture, but this time it was different. Instead of being consumed by anxiety or fear, I felt a sense of peace. I had done my best. I had given them a true representation of myself, and I was proud of how far I had come. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about the person I had become along the way, and I was ready for whatever came next. The waiting period after the final interview was agonizing. Every day felt like a lifetime, and I found myself oscillating between hope and anxiety, unable to fully focus on anything else I had given. My all told my story, shared my struggles and triumphs, and had presented the best version of myself. But now the decision was out of my hands, and all I could do was wait. The uncertainty was both thrilling and terrifying as I imagined the possibilities of what could happen next. Each morning I'd check my phone almost obsessively, hoping for an email or a call that would bring clarity to the situation. But the days passed by, and the silence only seemed to deepen the tension in my chest. My friends and family, having seen the transformation I'd gone through over the past few months, continued to support me. They told me to stay patient, to trust that I had done everything I could. But no matter how much they reassured me, the nagging fear that the outcome might not go in my favor lingered in the back of my mind. Then, one afternoon, after what seemed like an eternity of waiting, I finally received an email from the hiring manager. Heart skipped a beat as I opened the message, and the first few lines didn't make sense at first. It was as though time slowed down, and I had to reread the words to truly understand what they meant. The email began with a congratulatory message, and at that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I had been offered the job. As I reread the email a few more times to make sure I hadn't imagined it, the full weight of the news began to sink in. I had done it. I had earned the job I had been chasing for so long. The moment I had dreamed about for months, if not years, was finally here. But as the excitement started to settle, another feeling crept in, a feeling of awe, of wonder at how far I had come. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a culmination of everything I had fought for. It was the reward for all the late nights, the self-doubt, the rejections, and the failures I had encountered along the way. I immediately called my parents to share the news, and I could hear the pride in their voices as they celebrated with me. It was more than just a professional milestone. It was a personal victory, a testament to my growth and resilience. I had come so close to giving up, but I hadn't. I had pushed through when everything seemed impossible, and now I was standing on the other side of it all, stronger and more confident than ever. The next few days were filled with preparations. I had to officially accept the offer, sign the contract, and make arrangements for the transition. There was a whirlwind of tasks, meetings, and phone calls, all of which seemed to happen at once. But through it all, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I was about to begin a new chapter, one that held so much promise and potential. The job wasn't just a career achievement. It was a chance to prove to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. However, as I prepared to start this new role, there were moments of doubt that lingered. Despite all my preparation and the belief I had in myself, I still wondered if I was truly ready for this next step. The imposter syndrome that had haunted me throughout the job search crept back in. Would they regret hiring me? Would I be able to live up to the expectations they had for me? Was I truly qualified? Or had I simply been lucky? But then I reminded myself of how far I had come. The doubts, the fears, they were natural. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, being willing to learn, and embracing the opportunity. I had earned this position, not just through my skills, but through my perseverance. I had faced so many obstacles along the way, and yet I was still standing still, moving forward. This job was just the beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. When my first day arrived, I walked into the office with a sense of purpose. It was a new environment with new faces, new challenges, and a whole new set of expectations. But I felt ready. As I met my new colleagues and got a feel for the company culture, I realized that all the struggles and uncertainty had prepared me for this. I wasn't just another employee. I was someone who had earned her place here, someone who had worked hard to get to this point. In the days and weeks that followed, I dove into my work with enthusiasm and determination. Every project, every meeting, every task felt like a new opportunity to prove myself. And while there were still moments of doubt and uncertainty, I carried with me the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming anything that came my way. I had already faced the toughest part of the journey getting to this point, and now I was in the position to show the world what I was capable of. The decision to hire me wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was a recognition of my growth, my resilience, and my ability to rise above the challenges that life had thrown at me. I had almost given up on my dream job, but by persevering and believing in myself, I had turned the impossible into something real. Now it was time to take everything I had learned, apply it in my new role, and continue to grow both professionally and personally. Looking back, I realized that this was more than just a job offer. It was a reminder that success is often born out of the struggle. It's the journey, not the destination, that shapes us into who we are meant to become. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The job offer wasn't just a professional win, it was a personal one too. It marked the moment I realized that the journey wasn't just about landing the job, but about the person I had become in the process. The rejections, the setbacks, the countless moments of self-doubt, it had all led me to this point, and it had shaped me into someone stronger, more resilient, and far more self-aware. I had learned not to define myself by the outcome, but by my capacity to keep moving forward even when things seemed impossible. In the days that followed, I took time to reflect on the path that had brought me here. I thought about the first time I had applied for this dream job, the nervousness, the uncertainty, the fear of rejection. I thought about the countless hours spent perfecting my resume, crafting the perfect cover letter, and preparing for the interviews. And most of all, I thought about the times I almost gave up when the weight of my failures felt too heavy to bear, and the future seemed too uncertain. But each of those moments had taught me something valuable. The rejection letters had taught me to persevere. The setbacks had taught me to be patient and trust the process. The moments of doubt had taught me to believe in myself, even when it felt like the world was against me. And perhaps most importantly, the call from the hiring manager had taught me that sometimes the hardest times lead to the greatest opportunities. As I settled into my new role, I carried these lessons with me. Every challenge, every new responsibility felt like an opportunity to prove to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. The fear of failure was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it became a reminder that growth often comes from discomfort, and that the only way to truly fail was to stop trying. Looking ahead, I knew that this job was just the beginning. There would be new challenges to face, new goals to set, and more growth to experience. But now I was ready. I had faced the darkest moments and come out stronger on the other side. I had learned to trust myself, to trust the process, and to believe that the right opportunities would come at the right time. I had learned that success wasn't just about the destination. It was about the journey and the person you become along the way. As I stood on the precipice of this new chapter, I realized that the lesson I had learned wasn't just about perseverance or determination. It was about self-compassion, about understanding that we all go through moments of struggle, and that those moments don't define us, they refine us. Success isn't about getting everything right on the first try, but about the ability to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead feels uncertain. In the months that followed, I grew into the role pushing myself further, embracing new challenges, and continually learning. The job I had dreamed about was no longer just a dream, it was a reality. And as I continued to navigate this new chapter, I carry the knowledge that no matter how difficult the journey, the destination would always be worth it. Looking back, I realized that the dream job was never the ultimate goal. It was the person I had become in the process that mattered most. Every failure, every rejection, every moment of self-doubt had been part of a larger story, one that had shaped me into someone capable of achieving not just this dream, but whatever else I set my mind to. And that, in the end, was the greatest reward of all.